Once upon a time, such a long time ago that no one really can tell you the exact year, there lived 3 bears in a forest. Now, they didn't live in a cave like you might think. Oh, no. They lived in a lovely little house all their own. It was painted white, and the roof was of thatch. One of the bears was a great, huge bear, who was the father bear. Another was a middle-sized bear, who was the mother bear. And there was a teeny tiny bear, who was the baby bear. Every morning, they always sat down to a nice meal of porridge, which was similar to the hot cereal we know today. And they each had their own bowl. A little bowl for the baby bear, a middle-sized bowl for the mother bear, and a great, huge bowl for the father bear. This one particular morning, the mother bear let the porridge stay on the stove too long, and as a result, it was so hot they couldn't eat it. The day was lovely, so they decided to take a walk and let the bowls of porridge cool off a bit. Off they went into the woods. While they were gone, along came a little girl. She was very lovely, and because her hair glistened like spun gold, everyone called her Goldilocks. She was out for a walk, too, and as she came around a bend in the path, she stopped. For there in front of her was this cute little house. I wonder who lives here, she thought. She knocked. She knocked again. Then she knocked a third time, very loudly. But nobody came. Then, without ever stopping to think that she had absolutely no business to enter where she was not invited, she pushed open the door and peeked in. It was a charming cottage. But what caught her eye was a table, and on that table were 3 bowls of porridge. The great, huge bowl, the middle-sized bowl, and the teeny tiny bowl. Now, she had worked up quite an appetite from her walk, so she picked up a spoon and tasted the porridge in the great, huge bowl. But it was so hot she almost burned her tongue. So she tasted some out of the middle-sized bowl, but it was just too cold and icky. Then she tasted the porridge in the teeny tiny bowl, and it was just right. So she ate it all up. Now in the room she saw 3 chairs. A great huge chair, a middle-sized chair, and a teeny tiny chair. Goldilocks sat down in the great huge chair. Ugh, it was too hard. Then she sat down in the middle-sized chair and whoops! It was so soft it was like sitting on a huge marshmallow. She looked at the teeny tiny chair and decided to try that one, and do you know what? It was just right. But no sooner had she made herself very comfortable than there was a crash, bang! And Goldilocks found herself dumped right on the floor. The teeny tiny chair had broken into a million teeny tiny smithereens. She picked herself up off the floor and wandered into the bedroom. There she saw a great, huge bed, a middle-sized bed, and a very teeny tiny bed. After her long walk and the nice warm meal, the sight of the beds made her realize she was very, very tired. She thought, how very nice a nap would be. So she lay down on the great, huge bed. But oh my! It was so hard she thought her back would snap in 2. Then she tried the middle-sized bed, but it was so soft that she sank down into it and almost disappeared from sight. That will never do, she decided. I might smothercate. At last she lay down on the teeny tiny bed, and it was just perfect in every way. So Goldilocks curled up under the covers, closed her eyes, and soon fell fast asleep. After some time had passed, the 3 bears who lived in the house came back. The great, huge father bear, the middle-sized mother bear, and the teeny tiny bear. They walked into their house, all ready now for a nice bowl of porridge. But when Father Bear started to pick up his spoon, he saw there was porridge all over it. Now he had a terrible temper, and when he saw his porridge had been tampered with, he turned and roared in a voice so gruff, he almost scared the other two bears out of a year's growth of fur. "Somebody has been tasting my porridge." The other two certainly had no idea who it could have been. And when the mother bear looked in her middle-sized bowl, she saw the same thing. And in her middle-sized voice said, "Somebody has been tasting my porridge." Then the baby bear looked in his bowl, and his face grew as sad as a little boy who had just dropped his ice cream cone in the mud. He whimpered in his teeny tiny voice, "Somebody's been tasting my porridge and they ate it all up." While the mother bear was comforting the baby bear, they practically jumped right out of their skins at the sound of the great, huge bear's voice. "Somebody has been sitting in my chair," he roared. Then the mother bear looked at the squished down pillows in her middle-sized chair and said in her middle-sized voice, "Somebody has been sitting in my chair." Then the baby bear caught sight of what had been his teeny tiny chair, and he almost burst into tears. "Somebody's been sitting in my chair and they broke it all up." They were so very puzzled, and by now the bears were sure that something mighty strange was going on in their little house. Ever so quietly, they tiptoed into the bedroom. When the father bear saw the covers on his great, huge bed all rumpled up, he got so mad that steam started coming out of his ears. He roared even growlier than before, "Somebody has been sleeping in my bed." The mother bear didn't need a brick building to fall on her to see that her middle-sized bed was all mussed up too. She ventured to say in her middle-sized voice, "Somebody has been sleeping in my bed." The baby bear, in the meantime, went over to his teeny tiny bed, and what he saw amazed him so that he could hardly find his teeny tiny voice. "Somebody has been sleeping in my bed, and that somebody is still in it." The three bears gathered around Goldilocks, sleeping peacefully, unaware that she had been discovered. The great, huge father bear, the middle-sized mother bear, and the teeny tiny baby bear all took a deep breath and growled together, "What do you think you're doing here?" The noise woke Goldilocks up with a start, and you can imagine how she felt when she opened her eyes and saw three bears snarling at her. Well, she was so terrified that she leapt out of bed and started running. She was in such a hurry that she didn't even bother to use the door, but instead jumped right out of the window onto the ground, through the mother bear's favorite petunia patch, knocked over the father bear's honey jug, and kept right on running through the forest, down the lane and back home as fast as her legs would carry her. And I'm sure Goldilocks never meddled with somebody else's things again, especially without permission. Would you? Once upon a time, there lived a king and a queen. They had 12 children, all boys. Now the king said to the queen one day, "If our 13th child is born a girl, the 12 boys shall die, so that her riches will be great, and the entire kingdom will one day be hers." Then he ordered 12 coffins to be made. They were filled with straw, and a little pillow laid in each. They were locked in a room, and the king gave the key to the queen, and told her to say nothing to anyone. But her youngest child, Benjamin, saw her crying and would give her no peace until she told him about the coffins and what the king had said. "Don't cry, mother," he said. "We'll save ourselves and go far away." Then she answered, "Yes, go with your 11 brothers into the world, and one of you always sit on top of the highest tree and keep watch upon the tower of this castle. If a little son is born, I will hang out a white flag, and then you may safely come back. But if it is a little daughter, I will hang out a red flag, and you must flee as fast as you can, and may heaven watch over you." After that, when she had given her son's blessing, they went away. One after another kept watch from the highest tree. When 11 days had passed and Benjamin's turn came, he saw a flag put out. It was not white, but blood red, to warn them that they were to die. When the brothers learned this, they were angry and swore revenge, that wherever they found a girl, they would kill her. Then they went deeper into the woods and found a little enchanted house standing empty. Then they said, "Here we will live, and because you, Benjamin, are the youngest, you will stay here and keep house while we find food." So they caught rabbits and pigeons and wild boar and brought them to Benjamin to cook, and they lived together in the little house for 10 years. By this time, the queen's little daughter was growing up. She had a kind heart and a beautiful face, and a golden star on her forehead. Once, when there was a huge laundry drying, she saw among the clothes 12 shirts, and she asked her mother, "Whose are these? They're too small for my father." Then the mother sadly answered, "Dear child, they belong to your 12 brothers." The little girl said, "Where are my 12 brothers? I have never heard of them." And her mother answered, "Only God knows where they are." Then she led the little girl to the secret room and told her the whole story. Then the little girl said, "Dear mother, don't cry. I will go and find my brothers." So she took the 12 shirts and went into the forest. In the evening, she came to the enchanted house. She went in and found a young man who asked, "Where did you come from?" She answered, "I am a king's daughter, and I'm looking for my 12 brothers. I will search everywhere until I find them." And she showed him the 12 shirts. Then he said, "I am Benjamin, your youngest brother." And she began to weep for joy, and so did Benjamin. After a while he said, "Dear sister, there is still danger. We have sworn death to any girl whom we meet, as it was because of a girl we had to leave our kingdom." Then she said, "I would willingly die if it would help my 12 brothers." "No, you shall not die. Here, sit down under this tub until the others get home, and we come to an agreement." So she did, and when they returned, supper was ready. As they were eating, Benjamin said, "I have some news." "Tell us," they cried. He answered, "First promise me that the first girl we see will not be killed." They promised, and then demanded his news. Then he said, "Our sister is here." He lifted up the tub, and she came forward in her royal clothes, with her golden star on her forehead. And she was so beautiful and sweet that they all kissed her and loved her with all their hearts. After this, she stayed in the house and helped Benjamin keep house for her older brothers. One day they prepared a fine feast, and they all sat down to eat. Thinking it would please her brothers, the girl went into the garden to get flowers for the table. There were 12 lilies. But as she broke off the flowers, the brothers were changed into 12 ravens and flew overhead and away, and the house with the garden also disappeared, and she was left alone. As she was standing there, she saw an old woman who said, "My child, what have you done? Why couldn't you leave the 12 flowers alone? They were your 12 brothers who are now changed into ravens forever." The weeping girl asked if there was no way to set them free. "There is one way, but it is too difficult. The only way you can set them free is by not speaking for 7 years. You must not utter a sound, neither may you laugh, for if you did, your brothers would perish." Then the girl said in her heart, "I am sure that I can set my brothers free." And with that she went and climbed a tall tree and sat there spinning, never to speak or laugh. Now it happened that a king who was hunting in the woods had a large dog, who ran to the tree where the girl was and barked loudly. Up came the king and saw the beautiful princess with the golden star on her forehead. He was so charmed by her beauty that he begged her to become his wife. She made no reply, but nodded her head. He set her upon his horse and took her home. The wedding was held with great splendor, but the bride neither spoke nor laughed. After they had lived pleasantly for a few years, the king's stepmother, who was a wicked woman, began to talk against the young queen and said to the king, "She is only a beggar maid that you have wed and is wicked. Even if she can't speak, she might at least laugh. She's probably a witch." The king wouldn't believe her at first, but she kept at him so that he was finally forced to condemn her to death. A great fire was kindled in the courtyard, and she was tied to the stake. The king stood above in the window, weeping, for he had loved her dearly. As the fire was licking her clothes, the last moment of the 7 years ended. Then a rushing sound was heard in the air, and 12 ravens came flying down. As they touched the earth, they turned into 12 brothers. They rushed through the fire, put out the flames, and set their dear sister free. And now that she could speak, she told the king why she had never talked, and why she had not laughed. The king rejoiced when he heard of her innocence, and commanded that the wicked stepmother be killed. Then they all lived together in love and happiness for the rest of their lives. There was once a shoemaker who had become so poor that at last he had only enough leather left for 1 pair of shoes. That evening he cut out the leather. Then, as it was late, he went to bed and fell fast asleep. Early the next morning, he went to his workbench, and look! There were the shoes on the table, already finished, and they were so beautifully made that when the first customer came in and saw them, he was delighted and paid so much for them that the little shoemaker was able to buy enough leather to make 2 pair of shoes. That evening he again cut out the leather and went to bed. Early the next morning, just like before, there stood 2 beautifully made pair of shoes. As before, he was able to sell them for a great deal of money and buy enough leather for 4 pair of shoes. And so it went on. What he cut out at night was already finished by morning, and soon the good little shoemaker and his wife had quite enough money to live comfortably. One evening, close to Christmas, the shoemaker said to his wife, "Tonight, I would like to sit up and watch to see who it is that comes and does my work for me." So they hid behind a curtain and waited. Just as the clock struck 12 midnight, 2 tiny elves danced into the room on a moonbeam, hopped onto the table, and began to sew and hammer with such speed that soon the shoes were all finished. Then the merry elves, who wore only cobwebs for clothes, danced up the moonbeam and were soon gone. The shoemaker said, "They have made us happy and wealthy. There must be something we can do to thank them. I am sorry to see them with so little clothing. They must be very cold," said his wife. "Perhaps I could make them some pretty clothes, a coat, trousers, and little hats. And I'll make each of them a pair of shoes," said the shoemaker. So they set to work, and that evening they laid out the tiny presents on the table and hid again behind the curtain. Midnight came, and with it came the tiny elves, who leaped quickly upon the table, ready to start to work. But instead of leather, they found gifts all wrapped in shiny paper. In a twinkling they had them unwrapped, and laughing and dancing with joy put them on. Then happily they jumped upon the moonbeam and danced out of sight. The shoemaker never saw them again, but he worked and earned well as long as he lived, and good luck followed him forever.